Nintendo's former president and CEO, Satoru Iwata, is revered today for his many contributions to the gaming industry at large. The man was a genius programmer, responsible for creating compression tools that allowed Nintendo to fit large amounts of data on limited NES and Game Boy cartridges. He became good friends with the Mother/EarthBound series creator Shigesato Itoi when he saved the second game from cancellation by rewriting most of its code. And the Pokemon Company president Tsunekazu Ishihara cites Iwata as the primary reason his team was even able to release the original Pokemon successfully overseas. The man made frequent public appearances by hosting video presentations and giving speeches, going well out of his way in many cases to speak for himself in English. He was funny, relatable, and inspirational, so his untimely death in 2015 was felt in the hearts of all gamers. Since then, there have been several tributes to Iwata implemented by Nintendo in their own games. For example, Breath of the Wild features a somewhat similar-looking NPC who talks about a mountain and the holy spirit of a great sage that protects it. It's probably not a coincidence that the location and the unworldly creature are both named Satori. Then, in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, the fourth wall-breaking Game Freak building can be visited, where a team member compliments Iwata, and how his skills as a programmer helped save their second-generation games. There was even an emulated version of NES Golf, one of Iwata's earliest projects for Nintendo, included in the Nintendo Switch firmware. It was uncovered by setting the system's clock to the day of his passing, and moving the Joy-Con controllers to replicate his signature directly to you pose. Perhaps his greatest tribute of all, though, comes from his dear friend, the aforementioned Shigesato Itoi, in a published collection of interviews extracted from his own website, and from Nintendo's Iwata Ask series, featured on their own website. These latter interviews were mostly hosted by Iwata himself, centering around the people behind his company's products. It ran from 2006 until his passing in 2015. Topics ranged from consoles like the Wii and DS, to individual games, applications, and even series anniversary celebrations. For software that had a big team and got lots of attention, like The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, Iwata would conduct multiple interviews with different staff groups, such as having the producer and directors on for one discussion, and then all of the project's female contributors on for another. For a company that's known to be very protective and secretive about their internal processes, these now archived interviews are worth their virtual space in gold to a fan and researcher like myself. These conversations are especially interesting in hindsight when the central topic is a disappointing game like Paper Mario Sticker Star, as it allows us to try and make sense of what its creators were thinking at the time. There are a plethora of subjects to choose from, so chances are something here will catch your interest. And at the time of this video, they are all still hosted on Nintendo's website. To take nearly 200 long-form interviews and condense them into nearly 200 pages isn't the goal of this book, though. It's more of a best-of compilation for Iwata's most motivational and noteworthy quips, accompanied by Itoi and Nintendo legend Shigeru Miyamoto, who probably needs no introduction. Released by Itoi's company, Hobonichi, and finally localized into English by the lovely folks at Viz Media, who have brought us Westerners translations for lots of cool publications that could have very easily stayed exclusive to Japan. This is a look at Ask Iwata, Words of Wisdom. So who is this book really for? Would my niece like this, you may be asking? Well, it's obviously perfect for any Nintendo fan, but that in itself can range from those who have already researched Iwata's life to those who haven't really thought about the creators behind their favorite games, and honestly only really know who Miyamoto is. If your sole knowledge diving in is that Iwata was Nintendo's president for a while, but you enjoy games from series like Kirby, Pokemon, and or Super Smash Bros., then Iwata is more relevant to the entertainment in your life than you'd think, because he played a key role in the inception of these franchises. If you like playing said games, or any games for that matter, on consoles like the DS, Wii, and Switch, then you have Iwata to thank for that as well. There's certainly no mega fan prerequisite jumping into this book. You'll learn Iwata's background, and gain a good understanding of the type of person he was by simply finishing the first chapter. For most of the book, his story is told through his perspective. These are his own shared stories of his humble beginnings as a passionate high school programmer, making games on a Hewlett-Packard calculator, to quickly being promoted as president of HAL Laboratory, and then unbelievably overcoming the inherited 1.5 billion yen company debt. His determination and strong guiding principles as a leader paved a path to success, influenced by the visionaries that came to surround him in his life, namely his closest friends Miyamoto and Itoi, along with his late mentor Hiroshi Yamauchi, the Nintendo president that preceded him. I really like how towards the end of the book, for the entire Remembering Iwata chapter, the first-person point of view switches from Iwata to Miyamoto, and then Itoi. It allows for stories about these two, as told by Iwata, to be revisited through their individual perspectives. For example, Chapter 4 starts off with Iwata quoting Miyamoto. "A good idea is something that solves multiple problems in a flash." He mentions how that's a lesson Miyamoto taught him about making games, a treasured piece of advice he holds dear. But later on in Chapter 6, Miyamoto admits that Iwata often remembered things verbatim he'd have no recollection of saying, and that while he may have initially come up with the thought, Iwata was the one who spread the word. I also found it funny how apparently Iwata would compliment Miyamoto all the time. In Miyamoto's words, it was like he was some kind of prince. Iwata proudly considered himself to be Miyamoto's #1 follower after all. What's notable is that we also get to read two sides of the famous Mother 2 development story I mentioned earlier that any fan of that series should know about. Having been in production for 4 whole years, the game had reached a standstill and was stuck in development hell. The team did not know how to proceed, so Itoi had to call in Iwata for help. After analyzing the situation, Iwata gave them all 2 options by saying, "Working with what we have, it would take 2 years to fix things up. If you don't mind starting from scratch, we could be done in half a year." The Mother 2 staff decided to put their faith in Iwata and chose the latter option. When Iwata described what happened next, he downplayed his role in salvaging the project multiple times, stating that he thought the game would have worked out regardless, and that most of the art assets were already completed, so the 4 years up until then were not in vain. Which is all true, but whenever Itoi tells the story, he comparatively treats Iwata like a hero that parachuted in and rescued everybody. In this book, he also praised the fact that Iwata set up systems for the entire staff, so that they could all fix it together, rather than simply shutting the door and doing all the work himself in solitude. Iwata always cared for his subordinates immensely, so instead of stepping on anyone's toes, he created an all-access environment that helped boost morale, to give everyone the push they needed to finish. Itoi commended the man on all fronts, but of course, on Iwata's side, he remained humble well after the fact, a defining characteristic he upheld in most every situation of his career and personal life. The last aspect I want to touch upon is the fact that, since this book serves as a memorial to Iwata's life, his passing is reflected on by these best friends of his, which can be heartbreaking to read. What tugged at my heartstrings most is another moment both Iwata and Itoi separately reflected on. The day Iwata asked him to serve as a consultant for HAL Laboratory. When Itoi described the scene, he said that when Iwata divulged every facet of his approach to work, he mostly spoke of happiness, because of the man's innate desire to see people smile. Itoi especially liked the fact that Iwata kept using the English word happy in his pitch, and distinctly remembers that every time Iwata said the word, he would spread his fingers wide like he was smiling with both hands. What Miyamoto misses most about Iwata, who he saw as a true friend and not a boss, are their Monday lunches, as now there's nobody to say, "I think I've figured out your problem," after having seriously spent time mulling over it on the weekend. Their deep discussions and brainstorming sessions that led to revelations were irreplaceable. The excerpts chosen for Ask Iwata made for an exceptional read. I'm stoked it was localized into English, and even though I knew a lot of this information already from Itoi interviews, channels like The Gaming Historian, and from that big game developers conference speech Iwata gave in 2005, there was still plenty of new information for me here. Even so, having all this quotable insight and advice from Iwata himself and the people closest to him in one place is incredible. This is a physical thing I now own for reference, edited by my favorite creators at Hobonichi. I really want this book to do well, on the chance that more of their books may be published in languages other than Japanese. An English release of Pollyanna, the official mother comic, is an obvious dream of mine, but an overseas publication for any one of Itoi's works would be amazing. Can we get an official translation of Let's Meet in a Dream, this collection of short stories by Itoi and Haruki Murakami, please? Anyway, thank you all for watching. I'm off to pick up at least one more copy to give away to my family as a gift. If you decide to get a copy for yourself, please let me know in the comments. I can assure you that no part of your experience will turn out to be a waste of time.